Hey, good evening, everybody. It's Russ Nesovich with Nesovich Law. And today I want to talk a little bit about the passing of Larry King. Larry King, an absolute icon, a newscaster, a broadcaster, a media personality. And I wanted to give you some interesting facts about Larry King, some information, and talk a little bit about the estate and how things may play out. Now, he just passed today. He was 87 years old, so not a lot of information yet about the estate or anything like that. And there may not be much information, and I'll talk about the reason for that in just a moment. But Mr. King was 87 years old when he passed. He lived a nice, full life. Rumors are that he had a net worth of approximately $50 million at the time of his passing. He had just sold a $17 million estate literally within the last week or two. So his family residence, the one that he shared with his wife, just sold within the last week or two for about $17 million, net worth of about $50 million. This particular wife was actually his seventh wife, and he had been married 8 times. So if you do the math there, you will figure out that there was one wife that he divorced and then married again. And that actually happened back to back. So I think it was his third and fourth wife or his fourth and fifth wife were actually the same person. He just divorced her and married her twice, and then divorced her twice. So just an interesting little tidbit about Mr. King. He had 5 children, 2 of whom have unfortunately predeceased him. So he has 3 living children. So the estate should be interesting because one of the other interesting facts is that his most recent wife, his 7th wife, his 8th marriage, he had just filed for divorce about 5 months ago. So about 5 months ago, filed for divorce, sold the family residence. I don't believe that at the time of his passing, the divorce was finalized. So there is a chance that you will hear quite a bit about the estate, that you will hear about lawsuits, that you will hear about court filings, that you will hear about all sorts of people coming out of the woodwork, potentially. You may hear about all sorts of stuff. There's also a chance that you will hear very, very little. And the reason that there's a chance that you may hear very, very little is that California has very, very difficult probate laws. So it's very difficult and expensive to probate in the state of California. So in California, most people, when they do estate planning, will have what's called a living trust. And they have that living trust specifically for the purposes of avoiding probate. But the other benefit of that living trust is that it gives them some privacy. So the will that is filed with a probate court basically says I have a living trust and everything's already in my living trust, and anything that isn't in my living trust, I leave to my living trust. So the living trust gets all the assets. The will is publicly filed. That's all you see. And then the living trust basically dictates how those assets are split, whether or not he's left anything to prior wives, to children of prior wives, to current children, to grandchildren from his deceased children. If you watch the last video on the term per stirpes, you'll know that he may have done that by using that term. So there's all sorts of different things that could be going on in that living trust, or potentially a irrevocable trust, which he also may have used for tax purposes. So the federal estate tax exemption is $11.7 million. About $23.5 million for a couple combined value of their assets. He obviously exceeded that at about $50 million. So there's a really good chance that Mr. King did some trust planning, not only for the purposes of privacy, not only for the purposes of avoiding estate taxes, but also just because of the tremendous complexity of his estate. So with all that, I'll talk a little bit in the coming days, possibly about how that relates to New Jersey. New Jersey being a very, very different animal. We have no state estate tax here in New Jersey. We also have a much easier probate process, far, far easier probate process, and far less expensive probate process than they have in California. I will tell you a very brief story about the time that I got to meet Larry King, which I thought you might enjoy. So years and years ago, this is probably at least 10 years or so ago, we were actually out on the West Coast in California for a family wedding, my wife's family. And we were out there with her entire family, her parents, her grandparents, and her grandfather was at the time probably in his late 80s, early 90s is my guess. And we all went out to breakfast together at a hot spot in LA at the time. And sure enough, who was there having breakfast in a booth but the one and only Larry King? And my wife's grandfather had been a fan of Larry King's for years and years. he used to listen to him on the radio when he was living in Queens, New York, and then eventually got to watch him on TV. So he walked over to Mr. King, introduced himself. He's about 15 years older than Larry King. Walked over to Larry King, introduced himself. They had a very brief conversation. My wife's grandfather said that he was a fan, that he really enjoyed his work, but left him with the following line. He basically said, as they were parting ways, you know, I've always thought you were great on TV, but I liked you better on the radio. So I guess old people, when they get old enough, they're at a point where they could pretty much say whatever they want. And he had hit that point in his life where he could say anything he wanted. And he told Larry King that while he thought he was great on TV, he thought he was much better on the radio. So with that, I will leave you. That's my personal story about Larry King and some thoughts on his estate as it moves forward with probate and the settlement of the estate. So with that, I want to thank you very much. I hope you have a great evening, and I very much look forward to speaking to you again within the next couple of days. Take care, everybody. Have a great night. Bye-bye.